My name is James Hughes, and I would like to welcome you to the BIM There, Done That presentation. My colleagues decided the name of this presentation, and hopefully that may be one of the reasons that you decided to come in as well. ATG is a platinum level Autodesk software provider, and a platinum partner is just someone who has the best customer experience, best technical support, and best customer retention across all the authorized resellers. Let me take just a minute to tell you guys a little bit about myself. I'm a licensed architect in the state of Arkansas. I've got about 13 years architectural experience. It's a little bit cloudy because for the past 7 years, I've been a technical specialist with ATG after those 13 years. I've kind of got a different full-time job. And so I specialize, or one of the services that we specialize in is being a firm's part-time BIM manager. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And this talk is really just a retrospective of the BIM management work that I've been involved in for the past 2 years. It's not a list of all of the things that a BIM manager does day to day. In fact, it's really just going to be several snapshots of some of the things that I did for 5 different customers over the past 2 years. So I just wanted to state up front, kind of the expectation or the agenda. It's going to be a retrospective. We're going to be looking at some of the work that I've done and talking about some of the situations and things that sort of came about and a lot of the lessons learned from that. Oh, also, BIM There, Done That. You may be too young to remember there was a saying back in the, early 90s, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. On that same dumb theme, I've got t-shirts related to BIM management that will be showing up here. So I don't know why I chose to go in that theme, but every time I talk about a new firm that I worked with, you'll see a different t-shirt as we go along here. I think it also represents the different roles that you might be in, working for different companies. I've changed the names. So we've got NDAs with the people that we do business with. If I did a Revit training for your firm, I couldn't even say the name of your company to someone else. So I can't name drop, I can't take material or content that was created and sort of repurpose that and resell it or anything like that. So I'm trying to be incredibly careful and blur out any parts that needed to be blurred out so that hopefully you're not even really seeing a company's name. I've renamed them similarly, so it jars my memory of who we're actually talking about right now. So the first start of this is the Slick Group. That is not their name, but we're going to call them the Slick Group. And they're actually not an architecture firm, and I can't really get much into their business model, but they're not an architect, and what they do is they model tenant spaces, so office spaces that allows you to virtually visit those pieces of real estate and to imagine what the tenant finish out could be. And then they're also willing to finish it out that way for you if that's what you want to do. So April 2020 through July 2020, pretty much right at the start of COVID-19, work from home, back then, that's right when everybody first started calling it a quarantine. First they just said, well, your kid's school is closed, but this is right after that. Everybody's coming to grips with, I guess we're going to be working from home and people trying to pivot. And this allowed real estate agents to be able to do a quick presentation of a space and have that hosted so that nobody actually had to, because you couldn't go to the building and show it anymore. So that was one facet of how Slick Group pivoted to be able to accommodate this. But it's important because it actually helped ATG to be able to pivot as well and find ways that we could better serve our customers' needs instead of just saying, here's a package training and kind of going at services from one dimension. So Slick Group, they have a small group of young modelers that are really nifty in Revit, but they didn't go to school for design. So they're not architects. That's kind of changed a little bit now to their credit. But this is kind of what they did. This is kind of a snapshot of a hallway. This is an Inscape. A lot of the rendering stuff you're going to see today or visualization stuff is going to be in Inkscape, if you're wondering about that. Yeah, I see there's some fans of the t-shirt. You guys are in for a treat, because we've even got crummy t-shirts, just ones that you can tell that person's not a BIM manager that came up with that slogan. They just repurposed it from something else to make a few bucks. So they were working from home and taking a core and shell kind of approach. Like the customer might have these brochures, these PDFs of the building, maybe not to scale, but everybody knows how to measure a doorway and assume that's 3 feet, and then get pretty dang close to what is. I'm in Arkansas, if you're wondering about my accent. This service contract that we did spanned 4 months of continually helping them with multiple people on our staff. And because of that, it started becoming one of our longest continuous service contracts engagements that we had done. And because of work from home, and because of being in constant sort of feedback loop and cooperation and collaboration and with the customer, I think it became one of our most highly personable interactions. And we learned a lot of lessons just in that front. So this isn't really BIM management. This was us modeling things, but it kind of started to become BIM management because they weren't architects and they were kind of making some, I don't know, workflow mistakes, and we would make suggestions, and they're like, oh gosh, yes, that's a better way to do that, and so keep those coming. And so we kind of did, and they wanted to hear more of that. We got more involved in their company meetings and got really integrated into their force. The customer had us join their Slack channel. That was a new thing, or fairly new. Back in early 2020, the customer added us to their Google business account and even set up Google email addresses under their domain for us. And it gave us access to their spreadsheets and documents. We were looking at their pipeline that was coming in and where they were in production. I mean, unparalleled kind of access. And in the past, ATG, one of our mottos is being your technology partner. This was when things really started to feel like a partnership. Instead of the customer packaging up something from us, handing it to us, and having us work on that, it was like, okay, we made a key to the building for you here. We want you to come in, take a look at this. That kind of access was just phenomenal, and I think it opened up a lot of doors for us to be able to help Slick Group through some things. This is just another shot of a conference room. So if you have a weird kind of leftover space like this, one of the benefits of that service was to be able to put furniture in that space and let you imagine actually being in, that would be a successful conference room. You've got room for a television, you got room for the marker board, you got room for a roll around marker board, you got plenty of daylight, works great. Things started to change a little bit for Slick Group the more that we got involved. So this would be like a typical kind of bigwig office that we might model out. And we started putting in accent walls, and we started changing out the furniture to utilize global parameters so that you could just make one change, boom, and affect all of the woodwork in this case, or affect all of the upholstery in one move. And the customer had some automations like that, but we kind of kept adding more and more suggestions to really make that workflow faster, to get rid of family types that weren't being used, and to build out more that might be helpful as well. This image is about the time that we really started giving an architectural 2 cents. So instead of just trying to, because we only had 6 hours to get in, model a thing, send off some Inkscape shots and get out. It was get in, get out kind of work. And because we got some efficiencies in place, particularly for modeling the outside of the building, which is really leaning on Google Street View, honestly, and some precise measurements that we had from existing documents. But we were able to take weird triangular spaces like this and make it a successful kitchen, maybe a really good kitchen, better than trying to find the block of room that you needed previously to be able to kind of make this thing happen. One of the great things about using Inkscape like this is that your lighting is going to be really close to what you get. And so your ambient lighting is properly represented. You're getting the correct amount of bounce with that. Your lighting that you have placed into the model is going to start showing you what kind of darkness of wall you might need to kind of soak up some of that, if that's what you're intending to do for an accent wall. Let me back up one. Actually, let me back up two. I think I may have missed a point or so here. Nope, got those points. We wrote a job description for studio manager. So as we kind of kept working with Slick Group to be able to help them, they started to see the need to actually have someone with studio experience that could actually make some architectural choices. And they didn't know how to go after someone from architectural industry. And so we put together a job ad that lists the studio director experience that they would need to replace ourselves. I mean, if that doesn't speak to the kind of level of trust that we had, we're writing ourselves out of a job, but that really wasn't their intent. They actually wanted to keep partnering with us. So that was kind of a neat, another turning of the corner of that relationship of BIM management for them, or part-time. It was almost BIM management at that point. This is where another corner changed. In the past, they would steer away from anything having to do with the outside of the building. The customer wanted their fairly large commercial office space building modeled, and there was not much margin to be able to do it in the time that they had. And so myself and a coworker attacked this project in one day in BIM 360. I did the outside and he started work on the interior so that we'd have a leg up on that. At the end of a 7-hour day, this is what we had on the exterior facade of it ready to go. And it would properly show for some tight crop panoramas. You can see there's no floors in here. Well, not much in the way of floors here, but the materials are there. The reveals in the wall system are there. The exact mullion placement was verified on the curtain wall systems. This was kind of eye-opening for them. This is when they started saying, actually, I think we need architects on our team. That opens up a lot of doors for us. So then we started getting a little bit more creative with some of the tenant finish outs. So instead of just doing straight box walkthroughs, we ended up having curved walls. We ended up having, if you look on the left edge, kind of tapered wall systems to be able to show kind of a different, more studio, modern studio vibe for your directors that are on the left side of this. And you can imagine walking down this hallway is entirely different and a lot more interacting with coworkers in that space instead of if it were a narrow straight corridor. As you can see, we're doing a retrospective here. Things kept changing. So it was less and less polished, modernist, here's a clean box in a way it could finish out. We got handed, and this started being a pattern. ATG was handed the jobs that were kind of gnarly, that were kind of, had a lot of ductwork and lighting and structure that they didn't normally used to show because the fee wasn't there, or they didn't want to model something incorrectly. And ATG sort of prevailed on them that that is the charm of some of these spaces. That is honesty in modeling. You need to let us try to handle that. And so we've got wood beam systems properly shown. We've got our tongue and groove shown. We've got ductwork that they wanted painted black shown here. And you can see what it does to the space. In the past, the customer would not know the effect that the brick and the wood would have on the space. It would have been cleaned up and it would have been incorrect, but they would have gotten a bargain because if they decided to go with that space. One more little design turn here. So at this point, kind of a lot of things get turned over to us where we're showing pipe work, duct work. We're showing we're actually designing it now. So instead of just being handed a layout and saying, here's roughly the spaces that we want and where we want them, it's almost like, okay, you kind of know our system now, you know what we like to do, and you understand the spaces really well. You design and place these rooms where you think that they belong. And so a lot more design choices are being made by us. It's still get in and get out. This was still a 6-hour deal to kind of model this space, and you're only seeing about a quarter of it right here on the side entry. Last one I want to show you on the, well, hang on. Yeah. So we started laying out maybe uglier spaces or spaces that we normally would have left blank, because I think it helps tell the story of how you would actually move your stuff in there. So here's a print room in that same brick building, and we've bothered to show them how we think their print room ought to be laid out. We've made cabinet choices for them. We've laid all of that out. We've got cubby shelving that we've placed in on the side to be able to show where supplies would be for the team, or if they want to put prints there or whatever they want to do. Just kind of detailing out, I guess, putting ourselves in the customer's mindset of how they would want to use the space, maybe a little bit more than was being done before. Okay, so that was technically not a BIM manager gig that we had, but it's what I think opened the door for a BIM manager or a part-time BIM manager service during the COVID years here. And we took some of these ideas of finding occasions for us to share expertise, finding workflows that might be, well, probably are different than what you're doing, maybe better, and we can present those and kind of let you make those value decisions. And this next cut there, their name is not Super Plus. You'd be surprised how many of our customers have a plus in the name, though. It does indicate that they are progressive when you've got the plus. I shouldn't roundly make fun of our non-customer names here. But Super Plus they had proceeded with part-time BIM manager services from ATG prior to this. So we already had some team members doing it. Working for Slick Group was kind of my on-ramp to doing this. And so we had actually just completed 1 year of service, and it had been packaged up as quarterly contracts. And so we had one of our technical specialists that worked 1 day a week for 13 weeks, and that was a quarter. And then they would handle numerous things that were scoped at the beginning and then sort of reprioritized as the time went on. So they had already had ATG provide 4 successive quarters with 1 employee, and that employee was then needed to hand that off to me. No pressure, but he had already developed a very strong relationship over a year with that customer, and I was brought in as their successor. My predecessor was a Dynamo wizard and spent a good bit of his time making Dynamo scripts, finding things that were maybe inefficient, and then using Dynamo to be able to solve those and automate many of the pain points that the customer had. Here's the problem. I don't know Dynamo very well. I've made some basic scripts, but that is not really my background as a BIM manager. And it's honestly not a requirement for a BIM manager. It is a neat skill, and I still need to grow that skill. But what I'm going to show you has not leveraged Dynamo to be able to do the job so far. So my predecessor also would spend time researching things and then building out a script and then proving it. And I needed to kind of take things in a different direction to be able to help them to my strengths and to the things that they were needing. So I spent about 70% of my time converting CAD details to Revit assets. Now that does not always sound like a BIM manager gig, but it's back burner stuff that needed to be done. It was things that were costing them probably the most amount of money in their workflow, because when they needed a detail, they would go to either a previous job, muck around for 20 plus minutes, maybe 40, maybe longer, finding details, maybe doing cleanup work for those, and then terribly bringing them over, possibly exploding them into their project in some cases. So then I also spent 20% of my time making surgical improvements to the Revit template. They had a number of things that they wanted to have improved to make it more intelligent, to make more types of things so that you had better choices that would automate some things. And then I spent about 10% of my time making suggestions and documenting my work so that I could basically show them what I was doing, what I did, what I was doing next in order, and then they could reprioritize that if they need. Here you see an example of just a door tag for life safety plan. They already had door tags, but we were working out a way to run some formulas on the door tags so that it would take the width of the door, subtract out an IBC number for the door panel width, and then produce that as a clear inch readout on their life safety plan. And all they had to do is tag a door, and it would tell them size of the door, size of the opening, and then calculate how many people could fit through that thing. And you could input that amount. And after 13 weeks, there were still quite a few CAD details that were remaining. And so what we did was we re-upped after, so after that 1 quarter or 3 months or 13 weeks, we decided to do another quarter, and we doubled our efforts. So instead of 1 day a week, I was then working 2 days a week. And during that time, we were able to intelligently convert all of their CAD details over that 6-month span into intelligent Revit details. And I've only got some tags here to be able to show examples of this. I should have made more screenshots. I've definitely got more screenshots of other work that I was up to. But just imagine it was 6 months of this and not just 1 day of tag work here. All right, next up we had Mavis Beacon. Some of you guys from the CD-ROM era may remember that typing instructor. That is not the name of the firm. But Mavis Beacon, the company, had more than 2,000 families that needed work. Now, most architecture firms have not accumulated that magnitude. In fact, they didn't know the number. They just knew where they were, and I ended up counting them up. And so it was a difficult to scope job, right? I mean, they wanted to take families and fix them and add to them the ones that they were missing. And they didn't know how many families that they had. And it's probably an unknowable real number because a lot of those families have been duplicated. They've been overwritten with junk. They were now unnecessary. They were outdated. They were over-constrained, maybe from a manufacturer. They were over-modeled, probably from a manufacturer. Maybe Hayworth, throw them under the bus, or they were too generic, or now they are not what we do. So they might have been too specific, but it was like a terrible style or just a terrible thing that Mavis Beacon doesn't do. So we had difficulty scoping the engagement, but what we ended up deciding to do is that they had looked at their Division 12 furnishing families and had written a complicated spreadsheet to document what was wrong with those families. And the young lady that did that, I think they said she took like 3 months and opened all, I think it was 60 of the families. And in the spreadsheet she tested them and wrote everything that was wrong with them. And it took her all of 3 months and an incredible amount of her time after hours doing that. And at the end of that, she was just like, there's no way I'm going back in there to fix that stuff. It took me so much just to take a look at. It's just Division 12, out of the 40 divisions of stuff. But because she had well documented it, that looked like the perfect scope opportunity. So I mentioned to Mavis Beacon, why don't we just look at fixing your Division 12 furnishings and just try to handle that as well as we can in a medium-term engagement. So we looked at doing 3 months and 1 day a week. I came in. This is what happened at the end of day 1, the screenshot you're seeing here. I made a little demo room and I fixed families, and I made some of them from scratch. But we've got a few different types of file drawers over there. We've got some seating that was fixed. We got an ottoman that was created. We got a pool table that's still not quite there, but it was in pretty good shape. And then I fixed some parametric qualities to other things. All of these had material assets added to them because in the past, there was no way for you to set materiality unless you jumped in the family editor and took that on, which nobody at the firm was doing. Here's an example of a table. So I had remembered seeing this crummy table family that comes with out-of-the-box Revit, but it had one neat property, which was you could change a type parameter and specify its number of seats. And I thought, ooh, it has like a parametric array where it actually repopulates the seats around it. That's a cool thing. So we took that family, changed out the families inside of it. So different table, different set of chairs, created materiality for that so that you could change the material of all of these. And then I saved out all the different types and put them in a row in the demo room, and it started blowing their minds. They're like, you don't understand how terrible we've had it with tables before, and now we've got something that's scalable here. So I've got, you know, a little floor plan view of, you know, what that looked like, and I added the numbers just for their clarity, and then how that rendered out. And then, so this is the end of the second day with them. You know, we're now looking at the other end of the demo room. We took 2 built-in office desk pieces and made them behave, excuse me, behave parametrically, and also have materiality. So I kind of jacked with materials, made them out of aluminum and birch, I think, and then just kind of showed all of this. So what started happening was they had a Slack channel, and we were taking these sort of glamour shots inside of Inkscape and then posting that on there. And man, it really got their interior designers extremely excited about the changes that were happening to their furniture systems, which is 180 degrees from where it was just a month ago, when they had taken 3 months to try to figure out what was wrong with them, and they were just defeated. Now they're like energized, seeing all of the changes as they're happening with these screenshots, and with me kind of telling them, now you got a parameter to change this and this, and kind of demonstrating that, right? So we settled on fixing those 60 or so Division 12 furnishing families, and then making new ones. These are some that we went out and grabbed. And so at the end of day 3, you know, I'd kind of taken a look at all the families that they had and found similar style of things, and kind of collaborated with their interior designers. I'd send them a picture before I started with the modeling and say, it seems like the kind of style of stools that you guys like to work with. What do you think of this one? And then I'd start to model it if we needed that. I got some Bankets here. So these are parametric as well. You can adjust their width, their height. They've actually got several different controls to be able to kind of fit them in, you know, slightly narrower spaces if you need. And then later we have a table that's part of that. But here on this day, we actually didn't quite get to the table at that point. It was just quite a bit to make all of those arcs behave themselves. Like when you stretch the ends of an arc, it doesn't always behave. So this was a tricky family, and I would show them screenshots of it misbehaving. I'm like, hang on, I need a little bit more time to fix this, because look at this weird thing. We built this one from scratch. This is an office, I think this one's a 6x6 office with a standing desk. And it has different parameters for the height of the unit itself. And so it has a parametric array that repeats this, what's it called? You can hang stuff on it, slat wall kind of design. So it's got a repeating slat wall element there as a parametric array. Everything else, you know, stretches or changes depending on the size that you have. And they really just needed 4 standard sizes, from like 6 foot by 6 foot to 8 foot by 8 foot, and some in between. Created these under counter storage from scratch. One of these is one that can wheel around, and we, you know, made a cut along the cushioning here to kind of make that look like it was actually upholstered. This is a handsome one here. So here we've got a bench workstation that redivides the seating and supports based upon the length. So if your firm has somebody that builds families for you, understand this is like a big job. Okay, just because I'm showing you what I do in a day doesn't mean that everybody is busting all of that out in a couple of hours. This family was started by a designer, and then we stripped out some design specific things to make it more generic, and then we had to do some work to make it behave. So it's when it's resized, it's going to evenly distribute everything as it should and not have weirdness of, you know, connections. But this is a big job, and so when you work on something for a while and you take the glamour shots, it feels really good. I can't stress to you how nice it is to sort of achieve that and then get other people energized about being able to use that piece of office furniture next. So if they ask me to build a task chair, we don't just build a task chair, we build a little thing for it, and we put some Inkscape assets down. If you guys have been working with Inkscape, you know that it's got coffee mugs and MacBooks and stuff just right there in the wings, and you can just select them and then plunk them down, and it makes a space look lived in or gives it context. And so we kind of tried to do that while we were building these families, because it doesn't add much time, and it lets you kind of see whether or not that actually is an appropriate model for what you're trying to do. Love ping. If you need a ping pong table, I'm your man. This is an incredible amount of fun that I had just in a few hours to get this thing cleaned up, get the materials right, to create a net material that lets you see through it, and just kind of standardize the size so it's a competition table. We've got it where if you look at it from plan view, it's got dashed lines around it that show you how much room you need to be able to place it in a space. We handled requests for altering the families as needed, and tried to be extremely approachable about that. The customer felt that we were extremely approachable, and they didn't feel like they were bugging us to make changes to some of the families that they wanted. Here we've got a Mexican-inspired cafe outside of that demo room, and it's just showcasing that new umbrella that they were wanting, and kind of the material translucency that we had pumped into that. We don't have eye candy for everything. Just warning you, some of this is going to be a bit drier. Here we've got Interiors Plus. This was being a BIM manager for an interior design company, and we have just completed 3 months with them, and we are just about to extend. We are extending to 3 more months. This was a customer that has a number of template changes that they want to have made. And the customer wanted to have lots of details brought over from AutoCAD. And that was kind of the start of the work with them. This is just a screenshot in Teams. So where I'm embedded into their teams, asking questions. And I'll tell you, during this time, it's kind of a lot like I'm one of their employees, because when everybody's working from home and I'm on there just like their other coworkers, it turns the corner on the relationship. It doesn't feel like an outsourced thing. It doesn't feel like even an outside consultant. This is somebody in our Teams chat, and they're posting memes like we do. They're yucking it up with us. We're talking about weather and way beyond that kind of stuff. It's not just contractual questions of getting things done. We had a lot of discussions about standards, not on a standards committee, but kind of lending our voice to that, helping to solve some gridlock that may have come about from standards meetings as well. And we had a lot of discussions about best practices and other things that we're seeing their competitors in the industry do. So after 13 weeks of helping this customer, as I mentioned, we have just re-upped with them. And one thing that happened with this particular team is that they weren't always responsive in Teams. And we kind of discovered this. And I mean, we're kind of listening to the marketplace. When someone wants something, we try to provide that and then evaluate how well that's working. When I was working for Slick Architects, I was producing a weekly report of what I was doing, and there's kind of pressure on me to list out, I don't know, 5, 6 things that I did that day, and then list out 10 more things in order that I'm going to do next. And instead of that, we just put everything in Teams. And yes, it was a lot of good back and forth discussion if the team members were plugged in that day. But over time, and they were at first, but over time, I noticed that the interaction would taper down a bit. And so if I ask a question, I might not get the answer that day. And so I'd have to move on to something else. And so you accumulate a pile of things that you haven't gotten to yet. And so we kind of have decided to, for this next engagement, to pivot back to that weekly report and see if that kind of makes sure that we keep the processes moving the way that we need, instead of just putting everything underneath collapsed conversations in Teams. The Carmen San Diego group, yes, where in the world are they? So this customer wanted us to begin with an evaluation of their template. And they knew it wasn't in great shape, but they wanted to know kind of what was wrong with it. And the idea was, well, we'll evaluate it and we'll see how much of that you might want to do. And then we'll offer, how much we think it would take for us to be able to to take that on as well. So we spent 16 hours and really combed through the template and came up, I think, with like a 22-page report full of, you've done this, a lot of the industry is doing this, consider doing this, just a lot of suggestions. At the end of that, the customer circled it all and said, yep, we'd like to do all of that. How much for you to do that? And so this was a large job, and we approached that as a BIM manager gig, even though it's really just fixing template issues. But we were also to make ourselves available. So one of the other virtues of this is, we would ask questions, we would be integrated on their teams, and that one day a week, their whole team knew that we were available. And if they had questions, they could post that in Teams, or they could ask for a one-on-one. And I did have, I think, about 4 one-on-ones with the Carmen San Diego group to be able to help them. And it's always, when your hair's on fire, this project's about to go out. I don't know how to do this. The roof's not behaving itself. Can you help show me how to do this? And just to have somebody that is in the neighborhood that can jump on and do an interaction like this through Zoom, screen share, and solve some problems like that went a long way. It's not just fixing the Revit template. Because the Carmen San Diego group has one of their customers represents, and I don't know the number, but I would guess 80% of their work. It's a big deal customer of theirs. Because of that, they kind of had these divergent standards. And that happens commonly in architecture firms whenever you become very, very niche. You develop standards that this customer wants to see, and then if it's not them, then it's these standards. And then they just kind of become more and more divergent, typically over time. You hire more people from different work backgrounds, and they become even more divergent. So we had to help settle some standards. And part of fixing the template was, look, I need to know what your line weights are going to be before we make this change. And so they would have to agree upon that, so that there would no longer be 3 different principals that did things different ways, or 3 different associates. Let's see, here's a screenshot with the Carmen San Diego group in their teams, just kind of showing some of the annotations that were changed. Here we got view titles that were changed. I was asking questions about text heights that they use. I was showing them a tool that I was using to swap out text heights. It's really awesome if you're a BIM manager, by the way. So I was showing them Type Swapper, how we could basically hunt down these rogue text styles and change them out for the correct standards ones, and never have to actually open and find or discover the one place that wrong text existed. The customer also wanted help implementing a content management solution. If you don't know what that is, please look it up after this presentation. Over the past 2 years, a lot of your competition has moved into utilizing a CMS. You'll want to look at Avail, Unify, Hive. These are content management solutions where you store your Revit content and make that freely distributed to your team, which, by the way, is very valuable if you've got work from home because of COVID-19. After we evaluated the template, we presented the findings and began working on making those changes. Here's another one for wall tags. We had just kind of a standard, I'm sorry, that's a window tag and a wall tag. We had a standard, and then we had some for different applications. So if we wanted to show anything with the hardware group, or I forget what they were tracking with that, we had several different types that we saved out, and then we would do some work, screenshot it, show it in Teams, and ask them for feedback and get some feedback. By the way, I see you guys are posting some things in the chat. I do appreciate that. I am going to circle back at the end and kind of see some of the questions that you had and answer those. One other thing, if you are a BIM manager, or you guys have had a BIM manager, be thinking about something that BIM manager did or constantly does that is of real value, because some other firms are trying not to have a BIM manager. And I just want to kind of be able to speak to value that you guys are seeing, having that be someone's, if not their full-time job, making it a major focus of one of your Revit Jedi, let's say. We also utilize Bluebeam review projects rather than sessions in this case, because we had written that 22-page document, and we wanted to track what we had done, what we completed, what was in progress, what we weren't going to do after all because of discussions, and what was on hold and who we were on hold for and what we needed exactly to be able to do that. And we leveraged the status settings in the Bluebeam project settings so that was easily accessible by any team members. They could check in and see exactly where I was with time date stamps of when statuses were changed. And we had custom columns that would let us say, I'm waiting on the line styles from Maria before I can proceed on the next part of this. And so those get printed out as reports, and all of that kind of tracked exactly where we were and kept us from having to stop and package together a lot of information to kind of show where we were. Here's another Inkscape shot. So I asked them about their materials because they hadn't done anything. They had terrible materials in their template. And so I changed a few of them out to utilize PBR assets. I think we even used some Inkscape materials as well, but PBR materials are just multi-channel materials. So instead of them just applying a smooth JPEG to something, you can kind of see that carpet's got a little bit of a sheen to it. If that had more work done to it, you would actually see the carpet grab the light differently. And so it would not present straight edges. If you look over at the CMU block, you're seeing PBR material. It actually almost feels like CMU, it's actually, you can see the shadow wrap inside of it in the mortar joints. But anyways, I was just asking a question about, the materials that we needed to develop, and people were like, what is that? What? And this was just a doodle that was inside of the template. Other people had drawn in some walls and floors just to tag things and see if things were working right. And we ended up with this really random, jail building here. But it was kind of a cool place to be able to showcase material changes that we did. I did some put together a stucco thing for them real quick, which they really needed. And then I shot this picture and they're like, man, that's amazing looking. And it's just me looking up in Inkscape, just trying to show the light break through it. This customer also became very busy and wasn't highly responsive inside of teams. So we're paying attention to that. We're wanting them to have great collaboration. And we're going to be pivoting to doing a weekly report with that as well, that's broadcast to multiple stakeholders in that firm, because we ended up needing a lot of things from team members. And we found that it helps to call them out by name. I need this from this person by next week, or I can't do this. And that has worked wonders for us in the past to get decisions made. And so we're continuing to work for the Carmen San Diego group for another quarter as well. Like I mentioned before, we're like part of their culture, right? And so their culture, they might have some memes and stuff inside of that. So when we say goodbye, we're kind of missed is kind of a weird way to say it. Because we've done lots of Revit trainings and things, and sometimes after 2 weeks together, people are like, oh, we're gonna miss you. But here it's like you're a coworker, it feels like, because you're seeing me on Zoom just like all of your other coworkers. All right, Full Plate Architects. That's also not their name. This one's in process right now. And so I don't have much in the way of eye candy to be able to show you on this. In fact, pretty much all of my points are right here on the screen. This customer wanted to begin with something called a business process assessment. And if you don't know what that is, it's another thing to kind of consider. A business process assessment is someone like myself talking to your team and asking you questions that represent either common pain points that firms in the industry are having, and seeing what your answers are, what you're doing about that, and seeing what your struggle is more precisely. And then we take a look at what other people have done to alleviate those things, and then we present a report to you. In fact, I'm presenting one later today on that. And then this is going to lead to many informed suggestions by us. This firm does not currently have a BIM manager. They have been a medium-sized firm that has had explosive growth. And there is a phenomenon that happens when you're a smaller firm that tends to make Revit more of a democratic process. Well, some firms, not all of them. where and their democratic process was pretty much the same as that, where everyone's good at Revit, everyone is at a pretty high level in the Revit understanding, and so it's partly everyone's job to handle BIM manager responsibilities. They have some committees, like a standards committee, to be able to resolve some things. And one of the things that happens as firms become larger is they tend to become more specialized and less democratic on the whole. And so this is kind of one of the things we're talking through in that business process assessment. After we had interviews with their whole team, then we also conducted a number of one-on-one interviews. And this is a place for people to anonymously get really real about what is happening or what should be happening but isn't, and busted workflows that they're seeing, and they're not telling it to in front of their coworkers or their boss. This is just straight information that we can put together and sort of wash it a little bit differently so it doesn't sound like it came from someone, and present to them some of the findings that their own team members already have. So we're doing a business process assessment with them. There's a chance that that could turn into other things. There's already suggestions that are happening. There's opportunities for us to be able to help in some areas, and so we're kind of looking for those to see if doing any kind of other services makes sense as well, and they'll evaluate that as well. They're going to look at the suggestions that we come up with and decide what they're going to do internally and what they might be interested in contracting. And then we've got the McRib Architects. That is also not their name. That is a questionable sandwich. Some people love it. So this is our last example of firms, or in the sort of retrospective here, because this one isn't retro anymore. This is future perspective here. They're still deciding where they want to go with services with ATG. This customer lost a previous BIM manager, and they're not sure if they need to replace that person with a full-time effort. They have identified some part-time needs, and they're trying to assess how much how much work is there. And so we're going to do some work and gauge the efficacy of that, and kind of see whether or not it's time to hire someone, or if that's something that we can sort of pick up the slack on, or internally they can sort of fit what needs they have. This represents a new experiment on ATG's part. I'm sharing the inside baseball here with you guys. We're trying a light touch part-time BIM manager. I mean, part-time BIM manager is already a light touch, but this customer was initially thinking that they wanted expertise. They just wanted to talk to someone and have us demonstrate advanced Revit solutions for about 20 minutes. And they think that that's about a bi-weekly or every other week need that they have. After talking with them, they definitely wanted to do 1 hour bi-weekly for kind of more extended consultation, a little bit more getting into what kind of workflows they are doing, instead of just presenting a thing and getting out after 20 minutes. So that conversation is probably we're going to try a light touch and then see if it needs to be more often, and just kind of suss out what needs that they have. So we like to think of this as the start of a very nice long conversation that we're going to have with helping them hopefully in a great many number of ways. They're expecting they're just going to have some advanced Revit issues that they need us to quickly research, turn around and show them how to, what's the best workflow to attack that. All right, so just wrapping up our presentation and the demo, we showed the evolution of kind of work from home and team member integration. I guess that's one way to say it. We showed the content creation for visualization, showed you lots of nice Inkscape images of families that we created and fixed. We showed detailed conversions from AutoCAD to Revit. Not much compared to how much I did. I mean, if I started showing you a bunch of details, that would be a little bit boring, but I did a lot of them. And that tends to be the bulk of the work that we do under contract. That seems to be the most neglected work. And it seems to be the kind of things that firms experiment. They'll like give it to an intern and say, here, convert all of these. And they end up oftentimes with a mess of unusable stuff that still wasn't properly converted. So we do that very cleanly, make sure that we're not doing anything that hurts the template and don't end up with a bunch of extra line styles, text styles, dimension styles, and metadata that they didn't want in their template of all places. We showed family creation, fixing customization, showed template evaluation and improvement. Didn't really show you the evaluation part of it, but some of the changes that we did to templates. Some of that's graphical, some of it's structural. And there were a number of one-on-ones that occurred. Didn't show you any images of that, but a lot of personable help like I'm doing right now, just face-to-face on Zoom, where we solved customer issues that were on fire. And then when we finished, they weren't on fire anymore. We talked about BPAs, or business process assessments. We also talked about content management solutions, which you need to look into if you're not already in that space. And lastly, we talked about how the marketplace is asking for different services, and ATG and me personally, we're experimenting to find out what customers are wanting and try to be more adaptive to that. I think if you are a BIM manager, you ought to be doing the same things. You ought to be experimenting and trying to figure out how the world's shifting. One thing that we didn't talk about, and you'll see it over there in blue, I made a statement for the main conclusion, which is BIM management is cost management and it's not overhead. I should make a t-shirt out of that, because that is the reason why all of these firms I've talked about are experiencing pain points. They have the expertise in-house. In almost all the cases, they already have the expertise in-house, but those people are engaged in delivering projects that require their high level of expertise that's highly profitable for the firm. And they know that if they engage in this other stuff that needs to be done, it's going to be seen as overhead. And it's not. It's actually a significant cost reduction. So if you have these kind of tasks that should save you a lot of time, which is dollars, right? Then if you can't make your staff available to do them, if you can't promote or hire someone as a dedicated individual to handle that, consider having it done under contract. There's been a lot of success in that area that I've been able to experience just over the past 2 years doing it as a part-time gig. All right, and this is the actual quote there in gray that you're used to seeing. So we're going to stop here. This concludes the webinar BIM There Done That. But I ask you guys to start thinking about things that you've been able to do as a BIM manager that really helped your firm quite a bit, or things that a BIM manager stepped in and did for you, or is continuing to do for you, and just what's the value that you're seeing in that. And I'm going to take a look at that in the chat if you don't mind. Don't write a novel, but just put together a couple of sentences about what happened, and I'll try to address those as well as questions here in just a minute. If your firm's having success with BIM managers, just write a little thing about that if you would. So at this time, I'm going to take a look in the chat and see if we have any questions that it might have queued up. So I'm going to look away for a little bit, but I'm looking into this. All right, we got people that really like the shirts. All right, too much slick group. Fair enough, William. We showed a lot of eye candy. That's where we kind of learned how to be able to speak into business processes for firms. So that's kind of why I was trying to show you more of what we did with Slick Group. Right. Content management. More about content management solution. So I mentioned Avail, Unify, and Hive. ATG is a reseller of Hive. So if you wanted to have a deeper conversation on that, contact your ATG account rep. We'd be happy to talk to you about that one. I'm not mad at you, whichever of those three that you look into. But if you're still putting families in a network folder, just know there's a better way. That software has been refined. And it is worth spending effort getting it cataloged and getting it tagged and getting it disseminated to groups and specifying who's going to be the content managers for each of those. William, I do apologize if this wasn't going to be a deep dive into particular problems that were solved. So some of this is really just trying to paint a wide landscape of what the marketplace was asking us to look into and address. So let's see. Example. All right. Benjamin, how do you collect the data of the existing interior and exteriors and take that data into Revit for processing? I'm gonna guess that one was around Carmen San Diego group. Let's see. Benjamin, I'm not 100% clear on what you're asking with collecting the data of existing interior and exteriors. But if this was regarding the interior modeling that was done for interior design families, Division 12 work, they had a collection of RFA families, and then they had a longer list of families that they needed still. And I didn't show this part of it too. We ended up kind of going out and finding example products. I did it with ottoman stools, I don't know, about 4 other things where the customer said, we need one of these. And I looked around at the style of things that were in use, and I showed like a Google image picture. How about this? And then we either found a family that was close on something like BIM Object or Revit City and modified that, or we just started from scratch. If starting from scratch was going to be the faster way to be able to kind of skin that cat. Or we might start with an out-of-the-box Revit family and modify it if we wanted to kind of keep it really clean and make sure that the behaviors weren't, sometimes if you start from manufacturer's content, it can be like trying to untie the Gordian knot of figuring out how it's constrained and which parameters are running through formulas and doing different things. So it's usually faster to start from a cleaner template if you're doing family work. I'm not sure if I answered that question or not with the, how do I get the interior and exterior? Let's see what else. Adam says, BIM Manager here being the middleman between programmers and designers to help keep the discussion going and to translate between the 2 languages. Yeah, and so a lot of the people that hired us were actually IT, and they were asked by the architectural firm because they know some things about architecture to be able to be a BIM manager. And the more architectural it got, the more they felt out of their element. They know how to make things and they know a lot about Revit, but making the right things in Revit and the right solutions, the right workflows felt weird for them. And in a lot of these cases, I was calling it BIM manager. In a lot of these, we were a deputy BIM manager. There was already a BIM manager, and a lot of the things that they wanted to accomplish, but just were afraid to dedicate the time because of either prioritization or that being seen as overhead. They were able to offload some of those tasks to us for us to be able to help with them. Let's see, Raleigh says, what's your best method for model maintenance and cleanup? That's a good question. If your project begins with let's say a dirty template or a template that has not been rebuilt from scratch in a few years, and you would assume that it's got some elements that are starting off in every project, which is kind of worst case scenario to have a dirty template. That's actually shortening the length of time that a project has before it becomes corrupt. So it's a pretty serious issue. So starting with a clean project is number one. And the best method for maintenance and cleanup. Well, you need to audit your projects for sure. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. First, I think is managing warnings. That's something that, and I know the industry is not doing this right because I do trainings, I ask questions every time I'm in there. And there's only a handful of firms that actually have a regular rhythm of handling warnings. And what I like to see when I review a template is right there on their startup screen that they have a last warning review date that the project manager input in, or their BIM manager or BIM coordinator actually recorded the date. That tells me that they have a rhythm and they take that seriously. Basically, you just go to the Manage ribbon on Revit, and there's a little icon on the right that allows you to look at the warnings. And to most people, that is just nonsense, but you can expand it and you can have it actually show you the elements, or you could record the element IDs if you need to look them up and figure out what's going on with them. But your goal should be to eliminate as many of those as possible. And your BIM manager ought to be requiring project managers to do that if they've got a pretty high level of Revit knowledge. If they don't, and they're not part of that quality control process, and that's all on the BIM manager, then the BIM manager's got to be able to get in there, but they're gonna have to delete things. They're gonna have to reinsert or find new things. So that's why the project manager should ideally be the one that fixes the warnings. If you take care of the warnings, you're not gonna have many other problems, but you also, if you're not doing BIM 360, if you're doing a network hosted model, you want to make sure that you get a new local copy for yourself daily instead of always opening up your same local copy. That actually doesn't do anything to clean up the model, but it limits the, if you've got 5 people working on a project, you technically have 6 petri dishes where corruption is happening. You've got 5 local models and you've got a central model. If everybody's pulling down a fresh local copy daily, then you've just got the one petri dish. And if you're managing warnings and you're auditing it, and you started from a clean template, and people aren't running out to Revit City and putting nonsense in the model, you've got a really good shot of not having a corrupt project. So that was a really big question about workflow for best practices on model management or model maintenance and cleanup. There's some other tools that you can leverage. CTC has a BIM Manager suite that has some tools to be able to clean up projects. One of those favorite ones I've got is Type Swapper inside of it. There's Family Processor. I mean, there are lots of third-party tools that can fit that need to help you clean up projects as well. But the fundamentals I mentioned just a minute ago are more important, I think. Let's see, Azusa says, I'm a part-time BIM manager and create and maintain a template and library. I also do internal education. Yep. Having a hard time to train staff. How do you justify overhead cost? Yeah. So how do you prove BIM management is actually cost management? I mentioned about the report, Azusa. Doing reports is a really good idea because it lets you, all you have to do is copy and paste the request. If someone needs something, copy and paste that. And then, how much time it took to do it, how much you triaged, and then the end result. You guys saw a lot of screenshots that I did. That's because I was documenting. Part of it was exciting to do, but a lot of it is just me proving, okay, here's the end result. Here's the before, here's the after. And so if you've documented that kind of stuff, and then you can condense it and then be able to give that to somebody, that goes a long ways. ATG is continually having to prove that the BIM management service is worthwhile. We are having to sing for our supper. We were having to impress people. And so that's part of being integrated into the team. That's being part of helping to scope the problem, to be able to take incoming requests, document them, fix it, and then document the fix, post that to the team, make sure they see it and that it kind of addresses what they need and gets them excited. At that point, you don't have to really put anything together. The team will tell them for you. They will say, we need another 3 months of this. We need to not just do Division 12 furnishings, we need to focus on this other stuff here too. And they'll reprioritize you according to what they need. It is the cost management part of it deals with soft numbers. You are going to have to estimate if they're having to go to previous projects to get this content. Let's say instead of using a content management solution, your teammates aren't going to give you straight numbers, but I've done business process assessments where I'll ask them, how many hours a week do you think you're spending going out to get content? And a 16-person firm, when I averaged it out, was telling me that they were spending 8.2 hours per week. And it was just eye-opening for their team. And so that's per person, on their projects. That's an incredible amount of hours and rate. And so the content management solution's a drop in the bucket in the subscription cost compared to that amount of time that's being spent. Now, that doesn't mean that a CMS completely erases all of that time. It shortens it to where you're basically doing a quick Google search inside of, a Hive or something, and you're finding content and you double click it and it starts the command, loads the thing, and it's right there on your crosshair ready to place. And you didn't have to ask a coworker about what school was it that you had that, that roll up door in, and then go track all of that down. All right, Benjamin says the building exterior model that you showed, you spent 7 hours on the site with another person modeling. Was that all internal with photo or actually measurements? Benjamin, on that one, we had some old, I think that was a mid 80s building, and we had the floor plans for that and the elevation. We had the measurements for that, and we correlated with Google Street View to be able to make sure that we were, I don't know how to say this, but like Google Street View like puts it together for me. Like I know that I'm doing the right thing when I'm seeing it as it is recorded when someone's standing there looking at it. So I like to take my measurements from the documents and then sort of correlate that. So that's how that one was done quickly. Was we had construction documents that were not really easily digestible, and we also had Google Street View to help coordinate that, and we had some glamour site photos that they had taken as well. Let's see, Azusa says our users are architects and designers. Train them today, then they do not use the skill for a couple of months. Yeah, then they forget. What do you think the best way to train and help them? So a BIM manager isn't always the best person to train unless it's drip training. What a BIM manager does best in training, and I'm speaking to you as a former trainer, so I've spent 7 years and I've done about 125 customer training. So this is like my deal, right? A third-party trainer is really good for teaching fundamentals or advanced or whatever things were never filled in by self-taught. Because when you self-teach, you're Googling stuff and you're figuring out how to do a thing, but it creates weird gaps in your knowledge where you kind of don't know other things you should know in that same arena. And when you have a well-structured training, it actually is going to make it where you not only know that stuff, but you have confidence. Problem is you can lose it, as you pointed out. That rate where you start to lose it is as fast as about 2 weeks later, you start to slip with things. So when we're doing a training, I tell them, look, you guys have, you customer have the greatest obligation, which is if this person is now transitioning, let's say from AutoCAD to Revit, when this training finishes, they need to start utilizing this new skill they've just learned 1 to 2 weeks after they finish with it, or they will start losing it. And so that is the largest deciding factor of how well training lifts somebody. Now, what a BIM manager is great at doing is augmenting the training and training for exactly how your firm uses Revit. So this is the Slick Architects way of doing, or Slick Group way of doing Revit. This is how we do stairs. This is how we do project setup. Here's our first 5 hours of the project. We've written out all the steps of how we want you to start the project. And our template is set up differently, probably than other places you've worked. So let's walk you through how we're going to set global parameters, how we're going to choose some of these shared parameters that need to be set. And so that's best, that kind of training is best done by the BIM manager, because they know they've helped implement the kind of tweaks to the workflow that they want. But as far as general training, you've got several avenues to help you, okay? Some people learn by books. It tends to be engineers. You could get somebody a book. That's probably not gonna get it done. You've also got access to a lot of online pre-recorded sessions. ATG customers have access to something called Global E-Training. So if you are our customer, ask about that so that you can point some people to that resource. It's not for everybody, but it is great for self-driven people that wanna learn a new thing. Like if I'm an architect and I wanna learn 3ds Max, I better not try to self-teach that one. That's a tough one to self-teach. But if I've got access to Global E-Training, I can watch a few hours of stuff and click along and do practices. Then I'll probably pick that up, and nobody had to pay for a trainer. Then you've got access to instructor-led training as well, or you could do it internally. If you're going to do it internally, it takes quite a bit of prep time. It doesn't take me quite a bit of prep time because I've done it, a lot. And so I could just almost just show up and kind of be ready to go. But I mean, it's hard to judge how much time all of that takes. And I have reviewed what other BIM managers have done, and it tends to be about half the time that those topics need. So try to come up with extra examples whenever you're doing it, because otherwise there's a very good chance you either won't engage them or they won't retain it if they don't have enough clicks and actually doing it for themselves. So sorry for the long answer there, Azusa. And then you have to roll them immediately into using that new skill. If it's something that they're just learning academically, they will lose it. That's not on you. It's just they have to use what they want to keep. Man, great questions. I think I've driven us over, well, a good bit over 10 minutes over our time. So I want to thank you guys for your time. Sorry if this wasn't exactly what you were hoping for. I did say it's a retrospective. We're trying to show you different things I've encountered. We have if you check our YouTube page, you're going to find some more advanced user type things. If you want some white papers on how to approach content management solutions or documenting those kind of things, if you want deeper dives than what we did here today, we've got those materials available to you. You can go to the YouTube page, just type in ATG USA, you'll find this video pretty soon, as well as several others. And you can also go do a Google search for ATG USA white papers and peruse and see if there's something that's interesting to you. Those are all free as well. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you guys around.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and check out some of the other content on our channel.